Hello out there on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcast. You're tuned in to The Comic Crush. This is the latest episode of 24 panels per second, our comic book, movie, and TV show. This week, we're going to be talking about The Flash, as you can see there, the latest DC movie, and the first episode of the MCU's newest Disney Plus series, Secret Invasion. Before I bring on my co-host for this episode, I just want to give a big shout out to Keith Isles, who you know from making regular appearances on this show, and myself making regular appearances on Home Media Minefield. He couldn't join us for this episode, but he will be giving us his opinions on The Flash because he really wants to kind of talk about it. So he'll be doing that probably on our Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny episode next week. Also, a quick shout out today to our patrons: Stefanie, Matt Garvey, Paul Taylor, Andrew Smith, Ian Alwis, Ed Brenton, Jason Alvey, Jason Knatt, Thomas Behe, Daniel Bussey, Eammon Jacobs, Mark Bowler, and Gervaise. Thank you all for your ongoing support. Remember, you can join them from just £2 a month, which is less than the price of your morning coffee. You can also check out our web shop for back issues and complete sets at discount prices. Every purchase keeps the Comic Crush website and podcast going, and we offer free delivery in the UK. Now, on with the show. Joining me today, here I am somewhere. Hello. Joining me today is the writer and critic from the Irish Indian Times, a website that offers bicultural reviews for a non-binary age, Mr. Rob Deb.
Hello.
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 How you doing?
I'm very well. Well, I'm over 40 and I'm in heat. And I mean, because it's nasty outside. So it's really just been enjoying Glastonbury and
From
going
afar,
out in
right?
the garden, going to the garden and going, oh, that's exercise, and coming back in and eating all the salted caramel ice cream.
You may notice Rob's picture is a bit kind of glitchy today. So sorry, guys, we may have a few dropouts. Just apologise in advance for that. I'm also
it's
really
AI. It's AI. This is AI. That's why it looks so cheap.
I think AI is what you scream as it all goes wrong, Robert. So I certainly will be. I'm also really pleased to have the fastest nerd alive, Liz Jordan here. Liz from That's Entertainment in Massachusetts, which is it's Massachusetts' finest comic book store, I'm assured by Liz. So if you're in the US and fancy a trip to Massachusetts, then check them out. Liz, how you doing?
I believe you'll find it's New England's finest.
New England's finest. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's not stop at Massachusetts. Yeah, I'm swell. Happy to be here. Excited to talk about both of these things, The Flash and Secret Invasion. What a week! And I can't wait to hear what. Yeah, can't wait to hear what you guys have to say.
Yes, so I'll give you a quick synopsis for The Flash. Worlds collide when using his superpowers to travel back in time and change the events of the past. Sorry, I've completely fluffed that up. Worlds collide when the Flash uses his superpowers to travel back in time and change the events of the past. However, when his attempt to save his family inadvertently alters the future, he becomes trapped in a reality in which General Zod has returned, threatening annihilation. With no other superheroes to turn to, the Flash looks to coax a very different Batman out of retirement and rescues an imprisoned Kryptonian, albeit not the one he's looking for, which kind of basically sums up the whole thing quite nicely. Obviously, we've got Ezra Miller there back as two versions of Barry Allen. Like, for me, this was a difficult film going into because I didn't enjoy the Zack Snyder movies all that much, and Ezra Miller's shenanigans kind of put me off quite a bit from seeing it. What were your guys' expectations going in?
I had similar reservations in that, I think notoriously for anybody who's watched our shows in the past, I have the same sort of misgivings about the Zack Snyder DCEU films, which, obviously is where we previously saw Ezra Miller as Barry Allen. I never actually had any problem with his portrayal of Barry Allen. It's different to what we got in, the comics. They gave him sort of a very quirky persona. He's a little bit on the spectrum. He's sort of really just hyper, sort of anxious, and talks really quickly, and he's got like just a quirky sort of persona. But yeah, it was it's been a film that's been in development for about 10 years now. That they've been talking about doing this. So there's a lot of time has passed and a lot of things have happened since then that have sort of warmed me to the prospect of the film. I think that the DCEU, the stumbling blocks that they might have had, when this film was first announced, I think they've kind of worked out some of the kinks of that. So there was also, as we're going to talk about for sure, and I think, what a lot of people were most excited about, the inclusion of Michael Keaton's Batman, that made me a lot more excited to see it.
Totally.
What about you going in? What were sort of expectations there?
Well, let me tell you a story. I was very much seeing it as, and I think that's why I want to touch on what Liz sort of closed on there, is that there was this shift really selling it as, hey, it's Keaton. Did we not mention that it's Michael Keaton? Did we mention that Michael Keaton is playing Batman? You know who's Batman in this film? It's Michael Keaton. And also, well, it just, and I think it was also framed with this idea for me on a more two levels. On the one hand, I was 13 and I went to what's now the View, the Warner West End, because it was the only place where you could see Batman at the age of 13 in 1989 in the UK, because it was the first ever 12 certificate. And also I saw the sort of conversations James Gunn had put forwards, which was more about this was kind of closing off. So a farewell to what had been established. The Snyderverse, as much as I really enjoyed that BVS stuff, and that's where I was at that time, or the ads seemed to me to be more, but DC's got that poor reputation, undeserved reputation when you look at the frothiness of Shazam, Wonder Woman, Aquaman. They're actually very light films compared to a lot of Marvel staples like Winter Soldier. Yet DC's seen as this. So I went in sort of for a sense of closure and a sort of a fun, like, this is the leaving do. This is a leaving do for a guy, an era. I did think about, as for Ezra, it was like, it's a done deal. He's out of the film. He's out of the franchise. As far as I am concerned, or maybe we'll talk about that in terms of the acting and blah, blah, blah. But, there's a lot of other people there. No film is built on one person, but you did touch on it, Paul. It is not a Batman film. It's not really that much of an ensemble. It is 2 hours with 2 Ezra Millers.
Yeah. I mean,
so people have to go with that. But I was just interested in how it sort of depicted it all, and I'd say it was relatively lean for a multiverse. Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is
not like some of the other multiversal stuff that we've seen. I was interested to see how they would handle their multiverse. I certainly got an answer to that. Not necessarily the one I wanted. Certainly got an answer to it. Yeah. I think, like, for me going in, I was not looking forward to this at all for the reasons that I'd stated.
Yeah.
I think you bring out a really good point there, Rob, which is how the films are actually relatively light. I wouldn't say what the first Wonder Woman is that light. I think Wonder Woman 84 was very light, and the better for it. Aquaman was quite light. Shazam 1 and 2 were both relatively light.
It's intrinsic to the character, you know?
Yeah, and I think the problem with the DC stuff has been its inability to match its tone with its mise-en-scene, you know, with its look, and to have all those elements working together. And I don't like. I think this kind of had a similar problem. I mean, I've seen a couple of movies very recently, principally Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, and some others that are just, you know, really portentous kind of dialogue driven, not dialogue driven, but dialogue heavy, considering the type of films that they are, but really kind of over loaded with their own portentousness. And it's just like, look, this isn't like this isn't Shakespeare, man. Just come on, like, have a bit of fun with it. And I think the problem is that the tonally, there's never quite the balance that there should be. I think they got quite close to it here, tonally. But I mean, how did you guys feel about the central kind of pitch of the thing? Were you did you want a multiverse film out of DC at this point?
For me, I thought the central pitch was grief. Actually, that's the through line that I felt was the main point of it all, and sort of why I bring up, for me, the thematic of, I was 13 when I walked in to see Batman 89. I'm now sitting there as a 47-year-old man. Life has happened. Life does happen. The idea of going back in time or changing some element of trauma, I don't think often it's seen as some sort of monkey's paw and you just exchange it for something else. But by having both of them there, you actually realize that, you know, those things are part of growth. They're just inevitable parts of growth. His argument with his younger self for sticking monkey on a fucking dartboard is because he's never experienced. Why wouldn't he? You know, Mum's not going anywhere ever. She's an element to that Barry. And I think that came through right down to the decision at the end, the denouement of the bad guy, which, like most of the Justice League stuff, the Snyderverse stuff, is all thematic. So you're right, the tones are wrong, the plot's all over the place, and it's scatty as whatever, but the heart of it is someone actually maturing rather than just hyper timing his life away.
Right, yeah. I mean, the you know, it's what I mentioned about, you know, the Barry Allen of the previous DCEU films is that, you know, other characters found him to be quite sort of abrasive and annoying, and, you know, when he goes back in time, you know, and meets his younger self, he winds up as sort of, you know, the straight man to the more annoying version of himself, and you know, kind of has a bit of growth, you know, in realizing that, like, you know, oh yeah, like, you know, I can recognize these things about myself that I can improve, and like, so you actually have this Barry Allen become the more mature version of himself, and kind of have to, you know, look out for, you know, his own you know, sort of like reflection, you know, who doesn't have the, you know, the experience of, you know, of superheroism or the weight of the grief of, you know, losing his parents. And I thought that was very clever kind of, you know, way to like ground him and you know, help the audience empathize with him. Yeah,
totally.
How do you guys feel about the inclusion of Keaton? I mean, I have my thoughts on it, but like, I mean, come on, you guys both kind of watched that, as Rob has clearly stated. You've watched that 89 Batman movie quite a few times, I'm sure.
Oh, I loved it. I think it was also this film, as far as I was concerned, and maybe it wasn't the intent, but I understand that even the final scene, which I thought was brilliant, Who is Batman was brilliant, because to me it said, now this is going to get a bit more, so I'll try and lean the exposition. Warner Brothers was built on crime films. Okay, right. That was its original studio history, and it was always looking at other outs. DC, once it got Superman and then bought DC outright, has this entire plethora of decades of multimedia characters, right? Yes, superheroes, ostensibly comic books, but multimedia characters. Kryptonite was invented on radio, you know, and by knowing that this is kind of an endpoint for the DCEU, this was, that's why I say it was a celebration of everything they'd had. By throwing in other tangents with Kara and Keaton, you're acknowledging a past of a universe, because there's no need to get bogged down. In a way, it just went, this isn't about continuity. You didn't like Justice League, you didn't like the Snyderverse, but you know what? There's loads of people out there who hated, as we've discussed on other pods before, and someone recently sent around the thing, the 5,000 strong petition for Michael Keaton never getting the chance to be Batman. We've gone from a petition where he was the most hated actor to get that role, aside from that, to a level that makes me think, you know what? Yeah, fine, sack him, get Bill Murray in. To being the most honorific, Batman of a generation of 40-somethings.
Well, I mean, like, Liz, how do you feel about this? Because do you not think that he's kind of undergone Zack Snyder's journey? Because I remember when everyone wanted Zack Snyder gone from the DC EU, and then everyone wanted Zack Snyder.
What do you mean?
Keaton, as Rob has pointed out, he's gone from let's get rid of him.
Well, okay, I mean, I think there's a faction. There's been a faction.
That's not.
Oh well, Snyder. I mean, I think Snyder, was divisive for different reasons. And continues to be. I think the people who hate those movies really hate them, and I think the people who love them really love them. So it's with Keaton, I think it was a matter of as soon as people actually saw him in the role, everybody kind of unanimously said, oh yeah, actually he's great. I think it was just because he wouldn't have been typecast as Batman, at that time in his career, that you just wouldn't have looked at him as an actor who, had all these kind of comedic roles thought Batman. It's the same thing with Heath Ledger's Joker, which is an example I bring up a lot. It's like, you wouldn't have necessarily cast him because of his sort of, the movies he was playing at the time, heartthrobbish kind of roles. So, I think there's a big difference, between the divisiveness of Zack Snyder's films and, Keaton as Batman. Because I think that petition, everybody who signed their name to it, I think after having seen the film, would actually have to sort of relinquish and say, well, actually, he did a really good job.
I love that. Yeah. Val Kilmer was probably a more appropriate Bruce Wayne. And I did love the fact that within a few minutes, just let's face it, walking up some steps and a bit of delivery, George Clooney had me thinking, you know what? That would have been fine. He himself, as an older Batman, could have pulled this off. But they went with a whole film of other wrong things. That was the right guy in the wrong film.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, were you guys happy with the plot? I mean, story-wise, do you think that it did okay? I mean, I like I said, I know how I feel about it, but I want to hear how you guys kind of felt about the sort of general direction that the story took.
I mean, I think that what worked for me about it was just watching Barry sort of go on his journey.
Yeah.
You know, so you touched upon it briefly at the top of the show, but you know, obviously Ezra Miller, you know, is himself a divisive character at the moment, you know, as his, you know, sort of real life problems have, you know, overshadowed this film before it even came out.
Yeah.
And you know, it sounds like they have, you know, some genuine mental health issues, and you know, are seeking treatment, from what I understand. And it would be, you know, I mean, having seen this film, it reminds me and reinforces, like, you know, what a shame it would be if they, you know, sort of didn't, you know, get the help they need. Because really, I mean, that's, you know, as much as like Keaton as Batman excited me, and the idea of a multiversal film excited me, what actually, you know, was my greatest joy of watching the film was watching Ezra Miller, you know, sort of perform and play the two versions of himself. That was like, you know, I mean, they were really fantastic.
Yeah.
Really, really great acting. And, you know, I was like, you know, just the fact that, you know, they managed to juggle the two roles so seamlessly, and really invest you in that relationship.
Yeah.
You know, it was really great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I, you know, as much as I don't want to compliment, you know, somebody who's potentially, you know, done some terrible things, it's like, you know, you kind of want to hope for a redemption for them, because it was, you know, it was just a great performance. And it's like, I'd like to see that person be rehabilitated, and, you know, I don't know if they'd be able to continue in this role, but, you know, I'd like to see good things from them in the future.
I mean, my feeling there is that yes, the performance was good, but I found it really grating. I can't decide if it was grating because I was supposed to find it grating, or if I've just found them really grating. And I you know, and I think some of the stuff in their personal life does play into that, but it's also virtually impossible to avoid, because it you know, it continued in the press for so long and was so public, by their choice, it seemed. But you know, as with you, Liz, I always believe that hopefully there's a possibility of redemption for people, and I hope they do, they find that for themselves. But at the same time, if I never see another Flash movie starring Ezra Miller, I'm not going to get upset. Like, Rob, how about you?
I don't think you will see another Ezra Miller film. I would say I've tried to sort of look at this very much as the junket level, because the film is made, it's done. The only question I have on an industrial level, and it's more of a coda because we'll never know, is that given the negative press, it does surprise me that they didn't write this one off as the tax dodge and keep Batgirl out and put that out. But that's more a logistics thing. I'm sure there's a reason why Batgirl wasn't released and this was. I'd like to think that there is an economic reason.
I think those reasons are purely economic, and I suspect that when it becomes more economically viable for them to release Batgirl, they will. Because let's not forget, again, everyone was excited about Keaton, and even more so, you know, the more trouble Ezra Miller got into, the more kind of people backed Keaton. Because, and I think some of that's a bit cynical, because what that felt like to me is, we want to see the film, but we kind of can't say we want to see the film.
I agree. Yeah,
you know, let's find someone else to kind of, and you know, Keaton kind of easily slid into that role because, you know, Sasha Calle was essentially an unknown.
Yeah.
you can't root really for the B characters. No one really wants to root for Ben Affleck in those roles anymore, because he has stated how unhappy he was kind of doing a lot of that stuff, especially the kind of redo of Justice League,
the Whedonverse.
Yeah. So it just becomes this minefield of shit for the filmmakers and for
that's
for the
fans.
fans.
I mean, when they,
I just feel that.
Well,
I think a lot of the backing of Keaton became quite cynical over this.
Well,
film.
I mean, I think that's marketing. I think there's a bottom line where you have to, but I do think if the only thing I would add that hasn't been said about mental health and acting versus redemption, I prefer the term rehabilitation, but that's more because I don't believe in. Okay. We do what we do, but in terms of DC specifically, I would rather Heath Ledger had thrown a few outbursts and been in a situation where he had seen help.
Right.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Because once something has reached such a level, don't get me wrong, this isn't. These are explanations to my mind, not excuses, mitigators at best. Public outbursts are literally cries for help in most ways.
Okay.
I think his actions can be judged by courts and so on. I mean, ultimately, I'm a guy in a room wearing a Captain America top. I do think in terms of the marketing, it's not even cynical. It's just what you have to do. It's just what you have to do. I didn't feel that I liked seeing Keaton. I liked the fact that it wasn't just Keaton. It was like, you got some idea of what his life has been, that Gotham City has become a utopia. And I did feel that this is a man who had lost his sense of purpose because the war was over. As far as Gotham was concerned, Gotham was crime-free. So once you took that out, that is another perfect thing. His mum and dad died. He has effectively resolved that issue by making Gotham crime-free. But because that was his entire fixation, there was nothing else for him to do except eat noodles. And somehow, can we just talk about the fact that I know he's the world's greatest detective, somehow become an expert on time travel theory and it not being concurrent? Where the...
Well, it was concurrent to the plot, Rob.
Just to pass the time in a world without superheroes.
Well, what does the big brain do?
Concurrent timelines and spaghetti hoops.
No,
I mean that could just.
Do
you want to see my tattoo of Eric Stoltz?
No.
Yeah, I do actually have to say, they played, they were very heavy-handed with that reference, but I really felt like I saw a lot of similarities between this film and Back to the Future, even tonally with a lot of it, which of course, I enjoyed. Which
actually leads me to a point that I want to talk about, which is I feel that beyond the fact that you're just watching a film about other films. I remember a friend of mine bringing that up to me. Owen Johnson from Rebellion brought this up to me a couple of years back when there were a bunch of kind of redos, remakes, and reinventions of things, and late sequels, shall we say, for a lot of films. I'm not going to name the ones he was talking about, but he was just like, look, we're just watching films now that are about other movies. And it's just like, yep, that's exactly right. I mean, also, you've got to take into account with something like Back to the Future, it would be a cultural touchstone.
Yeah.
So I was cool with that. But I guess he's, with this, you're really looking at the casting and stuff. And I feel there were two other better movies in this movie that got stamped down so that we could have a big fight with Kryptonians yet again. And there was one movie which was as Liz, I think, pointed out, there was a perfectly good comedy where one Barry Allen tries to hide the other from his parents. And then there was another great sci-fi action thriller where they have to go to Russia to retrieve a Kryptonian who could have been, conditioned to believe, as with, Superman Red Sun or something like that. Only it could have been Supergirl. And it's just like, look, both of those were better movies than the movie we got. And I'm kind of a bit tired of the obsession that this series, that the sort of Zack Snyder era movies have got with General Zod, a man, a character who is important in the Superman mythos, but you've got an actor in there who does not want to be in the film and has kind of latterly come out and gone, look, this is really unsatisfying for me to do. I hated being here. And,
I do want to talk about Zod. I do want to talk about Zod.
Please do. Go for it.
Well, because I thought the idea of having Zod be the threat again was gonna be like sort of yet another sort of apologist move for the damage that was done in Man of Steel. And the criticism that film received for having, just thousands and thousands of people, slaughtered because Superman and Zod were punching each other above a city.
Yeah.
So I thought where they were going with it was, oh, well, okay, this is gonna be a redo of that, where instead, none of the people die and everything's fine and, and all of that. But that isn't quite what happened. They did move the big fight out into the middle of the desert. So that there would be no mass casualties when they do start punching each other. But that because I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe this is, there will be kind of a, a wink at the audience to say like, oh, well, even though, you were really mad that, all those people died in Man of Steel, at least in this universe, it happens differently. But then that's not really where they went with it either. The Zod thing, I mean, I don't know why they felt the need to bring him back if that wasn't what they were going to do. They, it could have been any other threat.
He just seemed so, like, you could tell just by his performance, he's just like, I don't want to be here.
It was very forgettable. It was like, I barely remember a single line of his dialogue or anything like that, or what his motivations were particularly. I mean, it's been a week and I, like it's already faded from my memory.
He wanted the blood because he knew that it was Kara because he'd already killed Kal-El.
It was all the stuff in Man of Steel.
Well, it was
the same motivation.
But that was the point of it. I think was that at this juncture. I mean, I didn't know how late this production went on. Apparently, the final ending that's actually in the film was only made this January, because. The reason I feel it had to be Zod, sadly, is because there is a complete lack of real plot story, because it is only about Barry. They don't want to introduce any new characters. Everything had to be from the box that has already been set out in the DCEU. There is, I totally agree, he's just like, I'm here, it's 2 weeks. I think you've seen the interviews. He only did it because Zach said, you know what, take the money. And then...
Well, okay, I would argue that, that they didn't need to include any of the Kryptonians, and they could have built a story around, like, the Reverse Flash as being the big villain. I mean, that seems...
but I think that would have... The reason why I stand by Zod in this one, Liz, is because it really is such a wrap up. I feel that the stuff I liked a lot of the humor. I liked the flats. I liked the babies falling and all of that at the beginning.
Yeah. That was a great scene. Yeah,
that stuff was great. But that stuff, the everyday stuff, was only... The thing is, because they're putting that stuff in, I don't feel that they could have introduced anything new. The dissatisfaction with the film would be more if this was supposed to continue. For me, I'm like, you know what? This is Spag Bowl. This is Eton Mess. This is, you've taken everything that's come before, including Nicolas Cage, and you've just thrown it in there and gone, you know what? This is what we've done before. Ta-da! And so that's why I feel it is a movie about movies. It's not a movie about comics. It is a movie about Warner Brothers owning DC. And that's what I think. Even if they'd gone with something slightly like Zod Light, like suddenly it was fucking Dark Side.
Well, I mean, like the other thing, what you mentioned about introducing something new, or the lack thereof. I still wonder about the inclusion of Supergirl, as a new addition to the franchise.
I liked, I think
I wouldn't say, I just liked her performance or her,
I don't take that from it. I mean, she was alluded to in the first Man of Steel, with there being an extra pod that we never saw had happen to whoever was in there. And in terms of her real ambiguity with human beings, she really was more like a Bowie definition of someone who's fallen to earth. But she's iconic because of the S. I mean, yeah, she is someone who's just sort of been substitute Superman on one degree, but I think they did enough to emphasize that she's a young woman, a young female Kryptonian, not a human raised Kryptonian.
Yeah, I just wonder, if you're kind of wrapping up your your story, why introduce a new Supergirl or new character rather than include another variation of Superman? It could have been Brandon Routh, or it could have been even Cavill. I wonder. I think they didn't include Cavill probably because they thought he would have stolen the thunder of the film. You've already got Keaton.
He's a deleted scene. He's literally a deleted scene. They filmed Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot with Ezra Miller for the courtroom scene at the very end, but James Gunn nixed it, so they went and had to think about it and came up with George Clooney instead.
I actually thought, I really liked the scene with Gal Gadot and Ben Affleck. And I'm talking about that part of the scene. The entire sequence I found just a bit too, just it clearly was, here's a body double that we've stuck Ben Affleck's head onto during any of the action scenes. I don't think he worked more than a day on that. And then right at the end, they just have him turn up for a bit of comedy, which is fine. It was a good bit of comedy. I really liked it. And again, it's goodbye from all of them because, we've learned this week that Gal Gadot is now not coming back. There won't be another Wonder Woman film in that sort of series. Which I think personally, I really enjoyed Wonder Woman 84. And after that, I'm sorry not to see where they would progress to, because I felt that those films were getting more interesting as they went on. But I understand why. I mean, for me, overall, this isn't if I never see this film again, I will not shed a tear. I just don't care. I just felt like by the end, when you're in, I get kind of the visual ingenuity of showing the different timelines in the way they did when they go into the Speed Force. But it just looked like Play-Doh to me. In fact, it looked like, which is something we'll get into when we talk about Secret Invasion, it looked like a sequence made from AI. And it was really interesting. I saw it at a press screening the day before, 2 days before it came out. The biggest cheer in the film came for Christopher Reeve, an actor who's been dead for 20 years. and despite what people think, has played other parts. And Helen Slater, an actress who appeared as Supergirl in a film that no one liked. And then for Nicolas Cage, an actor who never played the role in a film that never existed, fighting a giant spider in a sequence that everyone purports to hate and laughs at whenever it gets brought up. Those were the biggest cheers in the film. What the fuck do people want from movies anymore? Like, I just don't understand.
Paul, I think that's very cynical.
It's not cynical. Like, what do people want? What are we watching? What are we watching?
Here's how I feel about it. I felt that was just closure. It's like, it's basically just, it's fan service. It's unapologetic fan service, but it's like, it was like enjoyable, it's just like, it's not too heavy-handed,
but I think
it's just a sort of like, these are the things that you love. Here they are. They all exist. They're all legitimate. They all exist in one universe or other. And I felt that it was just kind of a little celebration of that, and they know this is the end, and they just want to give you like what you want.
I totally think this. No, hit me. It's like I'm
sorry. I'm always willing to listen.
I recently had an argument with a mutual friend of all of ours where I had to stop myself because he was moaning on about this not being right. Right, and I had to go, I don't care if Batman's not in the Marvel universe. Show me the universe you're not being a prick.
Well, sorry, this is unfortunately
it was no, because this is anything that's a celebration. I do think that there has to be a lot to be said about press screenings and everyone being oh so bloody knowing when it comes to Nicolas Cage and the Spider. Most people, I think the general public who films are made for, will sit there and go, oh, wow, Nicolas Cage.
I don't know. I think that story...
Where was Dolph Lundgren? Where was Dolph Lundgren?
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's just like, it's something that we never, ever got to actually see. And now there it is. It's like, what's wrong with that? It's just
we make up the idea that film would have been good. We all know it wouldn't be.
Yeah, but that's like, and this is as much as you are probably ever going to see of it. But, it's like...
And again, I've got nothing against...
And his tooth fell out at the end.
Right.
I mean, like, overall for me, just... I'm happy to see the back of all this now.
Well, I'll give my sort of final thoughts.
Please.
I would say that when this film was announced, I was like, oh my God, it sounds like, just as much of a big mess as BVS was. I thought that that film, I continue to think that that film's major problem was just biting off way more than it could chew, trying to cram in every single thing and the kitchen sink to try and just skip the queue and move up to where Marvel were in terms of putting out a Justice League movie alongside an Avengers movie, but the Justice League movie didn't feel earned because they just stuffed all of those character introductions into one movie, and it was just a big sort of shapeless blob of a film that was just overstuffed and I felt like that's where this, when they announced this, I was like, well, okay, it sounds like this is going to have the same problem. But, I think the 10 years that have passed actually, gave it room to, feel earned, in terms of, bringing in different characters and having them all feel like they belonged in that universe together. And it was actually just much more of a Flash film than I thought it would be. That's the other thing, whereas BVS was supposed to be a Superman film that became a Superman Batman film that became a Justice League film. And, this actually felt like a Flash film for the most part. It included Keaton as Batman, and that was very enjoyable, but it didn't actually take over the film, which I thought it might. And, like I said earlier, that my greatest enjoyment watching this film came from watching just the kind of antics of the two Barrys and their journey. And honestly, I ended up being really touched by the film by the end. Like the scene that we get in the grocery store at the end, between him and his mom had me in tears. I was like, I really enjoyed it, and surprised myself by doing so. So, and I like all the fan service stuff hit me the right way. So as much as I wouldn't say I was a DCEU fan on the whole, I think I still have many of the same problems with those early films. I thought this was really a nice crescendo for it and send off.
Rob, any wrap up feelings on this
mine largely mirror Liz's. I think, as someone who did buy in with BVS, because it was always about thematics, it was never about an actual story. I think this was a fond farewell. I think, sadly, I actually feel kind of apprehensive about Aquaman, because now that really is the film that doesn't fit in anywhere. I having not seen it, because that's I'm looking at everything now and going, you really should have swapped the release dates on these.
Well, they did, unfortunately, but just not the right way.
Right. But they, I thought it was solidly entertaining. I think the fact is, compared to some of the more convoluted multiverses we've seen, he just really goes to one universe, and it still comes down to Barry not acknowledging that you just can't go back and fix everything just like that. There's always consequence. Consequence just piles consequence. I thought it was a solid. Whether or not I'd watch it again, well, to be honest, much like Liz, I think all that will do is it will age. But it also says how 10 years, even if something starts bad, 10 years can build a legitimacy into something very, very quickly, whether or not it's a film franchise or, sadly, fringe politics. Half the time, it really is just staying power. It is just staying power. So yeah, I think it's a solid coda, and it's a movie film. It is a movie about movies. I was satisfied with it.
Okay. Well, obviously, I'm really glad that we got different opinions on this, regardless of how heated it got. I do love arguing with Liz. It's always good. But thanks, guys, for doing this one. We're going to move on to Secret Invasion now, which just dropped on Disney Plus this Wednesday just gone. I'm just going to give you a quick synopsis of Secret Invasion, of the first episode rather. In Secret Invasion, set in the present day MCU, Nick Fury learns of a clandestine invasion of Earth by a faction of shape-shifting Skrulls. Fury joins his allies, including Everett Ross, Maria Hill, and the Skrull Talos, who has made a life for himself on Earth. Now, again, another show that, or another piece of entertainment that managed to be controversial right out of the gate for, not bizarre reasons, but very, very silly reasons. I don't know if anyone has caught this on social media, but the opening sequence of the show was created using AI, which, if you're following kind of any artist or writer on socials right now, you'll see is not really something that people or that the creative community wants. I actually have my own opinions about AI that sort of chime with that. I'm thinking that potentially you are looking at the death of original art. Potentially not, I'm not sounding the fucking death bell right now, but I think you are looking at the potential death of art. And I just want to say, just for record, it's obviously by reviewing the show, I don't think that any of us are kind of approving of the use of AI in that particular sequence. It is something that we have to talk about just because it is comic book based. And it fits with our remit.
I think it's more than that. it's more than it doesn't suit, Paul. I mean, I'll just say, Disney is built on animation.
Yeah.
Any other studio, I would just sort of,
on hand-drawn animation as well.
Disney. This isn't just Dylan going electric. Yeah, you are throwing everything that you have espoused. And I'm not even talking about working conditions. Working in cell animation has been horrible. We all know that those things go on. But on a simple level, and maybe it's not even the AI that bothers me, it looks awful. It looks absolutely dire. And you are Disney. Now, if I went off and said, hey, you know what, Pixar? You don't need to bother with that lamp guy. Look what I can do with my hand.
Right.
I think...
No.
It's Disney. Yeah, I think it, I think it's great that people are actually voicing their opinion on it and that it's made enough noise that people there have to pay attention to it, because as you say, it's like, well, you're not honoring the source material that you're coming from. I mean, comics are
absolutely.
There's no AI drawing comics.
Well, unfortunately there already has been, but sadly, you're absolutely right, Liz.
Right. I mean, it's it's important to make your voice heard about things like this, and I think they will have to even if they haven't come out and apologized now, they're going to take it on the chin and and have to sort of.
I'm not one for the fans changing the output of a creative endeavor. I think that needs to be up to the creatives, up to the artists.
I agree, but when the artist is a computer,
this is what I'm trying to say. Is that in this case, I would love it if the fan movement managed to get this sequence scrapped off the show. Because I don't know about you guys, you may have noticed there is no skip intro function on Disney Plus anymore. As far as I can tell, there's no little skip intro button.
Really? Are you sure?
You can fast forward, but you can't.
Are you sure that's not just for the first episode? Because
it could be, But as far as I can tell, they've gotten rid of the skip intro function, which is also really, again, really annoying. But moving on, let's talk about the show itself. Lot of expectations with this one. Liz, I know you were really excited about this. I was really excited about it. Rob, how did you feel going in?
Well, I was quite ambivalent because I knew he wouldn't have any of the big leagues. I loved Secret Invasion, the event
comic.
Yeah, so I was like, but how are you going to make this work? I haven't seen any trailers. I've sort of really avoided minimal stuff. But I wanted to see a lean Nick Fury. And hey, I wanted to see a variation of what I always consider like Hawkeye. I've mainly watched. Firstly, I should say I mainly watched the films. I haven't watched all the series. Saw Loki. It was bobbins, but that's another pod. This.
You know, you've just said that to wind her up. You know, you've just said that to wind her up.
So I wanted that sort of like no powered. That's off topic. I'm sorry, but we should focus on the no powered superheroics, sort of dealing with super powered bad guys. Right. That's what I was looking for. Yeah, that's not what happened, is it?
Okay. All right.
Is Liz still angry about Loki, or is she just angry?
Oh, yeah, no, I am still angry about Loki.
So Liz, going
in. Rob. We'll talk about that.
Going in, what were you expecting?
Okay. Obviously, like Rob, I'm a huge fan of the source material. I always thought, right, even as it was coming out in singles, I was like, oh, this would make such an amazing live action story, because some of the reveals in comics is kind of hard to get across. Some of that, like, just slipping in and out of the Skrull persona. Whereas with live action and CGI, you can do that pretty seamlessly. And it did. I'd definitely like to talk about some of the shape shifting that happens over the course of the show. And I think the direction they took it is a really interesting one, because you've got this very, like, sort of Tinker Tailor, kind of story that's really more of a spy story. It's the sort of Skrull invasion is they've grounded that to be sort of more of a a story about radicalism and terrorism, and and they've kind of drawn from some very relevant real world problems, and the story is essentially about trust, and with the Skrulls being able to impersonate anyone, who do you trust, which is kind of the big tagline for Secret Invasion, the comic. And and having the story focus on Nick Fury as a central character, like, that is the spy, that is of the MCU, that's the guy you want to see at the center of the story.
I think that it's interesting, kind of looking at when you say Tinker Tailor, that's a good kind of callback. And you even have the scene with Olivia Colman where she describes MI5 as the circus. Which actually I think is purely an invention of John le Carre when he was writing the original Tinker Tailor. He dubbed it the circus, and of course he worked for MI5 or 6 in real life. That was his whole kind of thing. That's where the kind of novels began. I like. It's interesting kind of seeing your expectations of what's going on in the show met with what's actually going on. I mean, I'm thinking primarily of the character of Gia, who I genuinely thought in spy terms was like, oh yeah, she's gone undercover. She's a plant. She's kind of pretending to help out Gravik, and she isn't. She's like, no, she's a believer. She's there to kind of bring about this new Skrullos, and that kind of, I think that could have been a bit more chilling. Ultimately,
well, I think, but it's common in regards to most people, in as far as what people are won't necessarily be who get radicalized.
Yeah.
The common denominators will generally be that much younger, and more often than not, the second or third generation. If you have any sort of cultural views, but you haven't necessarily had the upbringing of it, I'm referring to my own experience here, is that you can often find a gap, and that's where radicalization can come in. If you have been raised in one place, but been told by others, a place that you are told exclusively that you do not fit in, often by the mainstream, yet someone else comes along and tells you that there's some sort of Valhalla for you if you put yourself out and make that sacrifice, that's pretty commonplace as a manipulation tool.
Yeah. I mean,
so
Liz,
her actions are because she is the child of someone who's told her something. Where is this home? I'm now a person in my prime. I'm a young person in my prime. You're telling me of something that will be. I've never seen it happen. Where is my Oz?
Right.
You know, I mean, it's not that it's chilling.
Right.
It's actually quite banal.
Yeah, her parents, were
big.
making her these promises for 30 years, and Captain Marvel and Nick Fury had made these promises, and where did they go? They're, nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
So she and, the other, probably Gravik, who is, probably similar in age to her, are disenchanted and, maybe rightfully, believe, well, they're never going to come through. So we have to, go about this our own way. Unfortunately, their own way is a violent and, sort of extremist way.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the bits that I think it caught the fact that the groups that they are sort of, they're not trying to break into Greenpeace. They are putting themselves into elements of Hydra, and I use Hydra, but other real world equivalents, because they know that the end game is to get violent humans to be more violent. That's where they can profit. Right. But yeah, that appeal in terms of on a generational sense is something you see across the board, really. And I'm not even just to be very clear on this, not even necessarily within a migrant culture. I'm also talking about things we see where economic deprivation has led people to believe that there was some green and better land, like of Arthurian times. That's just as easily exploitable.
Yeah.
How do you feel about their handling of Fury? Because we're now post Endgame, post all of that stuff. I think it's the first time we've seen Fury since the last moments of Endgame, isn't it?
No, we've seen. Well, okay, so we've seen in
No Way Home.
Oh yeah. Well,
tail end, we see that he's on Saber.
Yeah.
Right.
Where's my shoes?
Yeah. I think that may be the
but that was it. We haven't really
But we've known he was out in space.
Yeah.
He's been on Saber, which is basically the world's most sort of sophisticated aerospace program is what they're developing with the Skrulls. But we know he's been off world, and we're repeatedly told throughout this episode that he has been different since the blip.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that the way they've tried to sell it, which I really didn't like, personally, because I wanted to see an A-game Nick Fury. Yeah. Setting up explosions, grabbing Skrull weapons from the back of a cache, that sort of thing. I didn't need this guy who's frankly, I don't think that the blip would have taken out his mojo to such a great degree as like Maria Hill is sort of saying.
Okay, well here's here's what I think. I think what they're trying to posit in episode 1 is he's sort of been out of the loop. He's like, gone out to pasture. He's an old man. He is. Sam Jackson's in his 70s. He is, he's got a limp. He doesn't seem to be on his A game. He seems to be, pretty easily duped. He gets grabbed by Sonya's bagmen, almost immediately upon walking out the door. We have Sonya telling him, you don't look like you're up for this. You've changed since the blip. Maria Hill says the same thing in that scene in the bar. She says, they're playing chess, and she's like, are you going to make a move? And he says, I haven't decided yet. And she says, well, you're normally supposed to be 3 steps ahead. That's the Nick Fury I know. So, I felt like that was like, kind of given to you, re-emphasized multiple times over the course of the episode. So what are you supposed to believe, though? Is Nick Fury really, this sort of old man who's past it, or is that just what he wants you to think?
Like he says, he's crap.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the kind of old man who's past it is very much in keeping with the kind of Le Carré spy thing that they're touching on. So it wouldn't surprise me if that kind of is the case. But yeah, I mean, you kind of want it to be that he's just trying to dupe everyone, because he's got a record for sort of playing dead and then, at the last minute or when he's most needed appearing. I mean, Winter Soldier, which doubtless people are hoping this will kind of mimic in a lot of ways. That was quite famously a big plot point in that. And
I wonder if this is him being 3 steps ahead and just presenting himself.
I really hope so. I I mean, I did like the ending, and that this is all spoilerific, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
don't worry.
Special guest, not cast member, special guest, Colby Smulders.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do we feel that's it for Maria Hill?
It was if it is, that was a very, very bold ending to your first episode. I mean, because as far as my expectations, this was going to be, a Fury and Maria Hill story.
Yeah.
Up and then lead into, in some way, the Marvels.
Right.
Yeah, completely. This is what I thought going in. I mean, this is the series about which I kind of have known the least going in. Because although normally I would be all over the TV spots and trailers and whatnot and the kind of gossip on it, I've kind of not on purpose, but this time I've sort of followed Liz's lead of just avoiding everything. But just because I've been too busy.
Well, I think it benefits from that. I think it benefits from, sort of a, just going in blind. And, I think it leaves you with a lot of questions. It definitely leaves you with a lot of questions about, is Maria Hill really dead? Because it appears, you're kind of waiting at the end for her to shapeshift into a Skrull if it's not the actual Maria Hill. And that doesn't happen. However, is it that could still be an elaborate fake out? You can't put any of that past, Fury or Talos, and we're told that Talos's wife Soren is dead. At the beginning of the episode, and it's mentioned a few times during the episode, but we don't see her die. We haven't.
It would be pretty cold though, because you have that whole scene with him and Gia. It would be pretty cold if she isn't.
Well, I mean, at the same time, he, there were some things that felt off about his interactions with Gaia, because he sort of lets her walk away with the backpack bomb. Like he she sort of swats him and then just goes. And he just stays there. It's like, that doesn't seem quite right, and then she just comes back, and he and Fury seem to just believe that she's changed her mind about all of her, deep-seated radicalized beliefs just because she says so. Some of that felt off. It's like, well, even if Talos really wanted to believe that she was telling the truth about coming back into the fold, would Fury believe that? Would Maria Hill believe that? Without second guessing it,
I think there is that. I
know we're not something about that felt like, well, okay, so maybe
you know, maybe he just wanted to get her back into the, you know, I mean, and would be willing to, as you say, do something really cold and tell her that her mother was dead to keep her mother's cover if her mother is in fact still alive. And, you know, because, you know, you could then theorize like, well, was that really Maria Hill? You know, was it Soren posing as Maria Hill? Was, you know, so there's, you know, there's still questions about that. Is Soren really dead? Is Maria Hill really dead?
Because we already had the sort of fake out at the beginning with
Everett
Ross, yeah.
Who, you know, presumably, you know, does that mean Everett Ross is like, you know, one of those shells, like, you know, the people who are being kept in that,
could be,
you know, in that compound, after having their mind, you know, sort of
we've got to
absorbed.
We've got to think about where we last saw Everett Ross, which was being kidnapped essentially by the Wakandans. So one assumes or would hope that he's safe in Wakanda, unless there's going to be some sort of flashback to that moment and it's going to be scrolls, because really they could reinvent the history of any moment in the MCU.
Well, yeah, Everett Ross could have always been a scroll. That's the bottom line.
Could have been, yeah. Could have been. It'll be quite interesting to see what happens there, and maybe we'll kind of get Val in on this as well. You know, maybe.
Yeah, it feels like this would be a very likely place for her to show up at some point.
I always find that kind of clandestine world of S.H.I.E.L.D. more interesting to a certain degree than a lot of the superhero stuff. And I'm kind of rooting for this to be a really kind of big, you know, major turning point for the MCU stuff. I don't know that it will be, but you know, it's certainly what I'm kind of, you know, crossing fingers for.
I don't know. I want my happy, scrappy hero pup from Marvel.
I want
it all.
All valid, yeah.
And one of the things I'd like to say about this is it seems to be the first Disney Plus show that feels closer in tone to the Marvel Netflix shows.
Yes, definitely.
It feels like, you know, and I don't know about you guys, but the way it was, like, you know, the Disney Plus, usually when something like this airs, it'll be the first thing on the front page that you see when you click into Disney Plus, and that was not the case with this. I was like, is it definitely out today? What's going on? You had to go and click into Marvel for it to show up as the advertised thing. And so I was like, okay, so they're actually kind of trying to, like, kind of keep this perhaps away from the eyes of the kids.
I think I had to type in my PIN. I should explain a bit more, because I've got kids. Well, I don't know. Because teenagers will be in the house. So there's a PIN on my stuff for Star.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I went to watch this, and then it asked for the PIN. Whereas if you're using the kids stuff, it won't ask for that. So
yeah, well, this definitely, you know, it definitely felt more mature. It definitely felt darker.
As you said,
you know,
Netflix.
It feels like it's bridging the gap between the sort of, you know, the tone of the films and the tone of the Marvel Netflix stuff. You know, it's not quite at the level of the Marvel Netflix stuff in terms of violence and stuff like that yet. But like the death scene with Maria Hill was like, you know, it was pretty like grim. You know, they show the blood, like, you know, a lot of times with a Marvel death like that, if it had been in the films, you would have just, you know, they would have avoided showing, you know, some of the grisliness of it.
Yeah, but the grim verbal dynamics, racial jibes and so on, you know, relatively tame.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think you would get in a more mainstream Marvel sort of show. I mean, we're talking about, we live in a world where Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was the first Marvel film to have the word fuck in it.
Right.
I found that stuff fascinating, actually, Rob, because them kind of being quite out there about how, how black people will be seen in Russia was quite a bold sort of statement to kind of start off with.
I think choosing Moscow was probably actually a bad move given the current last couple of years.
Yeah, but I kind of wonder if it just becomes an easy, it's the easy enemy.
That's exactly
like the Arabs in 2001. It just
but that's exactly what I sort of say. Yeah. I mean they do that. I studied Russians in terms of I literally did Russian studies in the 90s as a course. I got kicked out because I got as far as it's just some basic Russian for you both. Dobry dien, good morning. Dobry utrum, good evening. Меня зовут Robin, self-explanatory. And of course, Я не знаю русский язык, which is, I'm sorry, I do not speak Russian.
Yeah.
Okay. But as a depiction of Russia, I felt it was the film. It looked weirdly cheap in some ways. I'm not just talking about the AI.
Well,
I felt it was lopsided kind of depictions.
A depiction of Russia. Filmed in Liverpool and London, quite obviously.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and it was. I was sort of dancing around that, but yeah, and I was like, maybe not be in Russia. Maybe not be in Russia. And there was a certain, there's some bar type stuff that I just thought, no.
Well, I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't have a problem with the location of it. But I did think that it was some of the, like you mentioned, that bar scene. The bar scene was interesting to me because you have Fury and Maria Hill having that conversation in public.
Yeah.
Rather than in a private sort of location. And I wonder if that was by design. I wonder if, there's been a lot of speculation about that conversation between Fury and Maria Hill, whether they're kind of talking in code.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of fan theories and I won't go too deep into it.
Because
there's if you Google it, you can find, what people are talking about. And the main thing that I kind of walked away from with this was that I just saw something that later I'm probably going to understand more.
You're happy with the sort of level of promise that's been given.
Right. And I also think, I also think that there's probably another layer to it that these are spies, these are masters, they're the best, best spies on the planet. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they were talking in code the whole time, if there was more going on than what you see on the surface. So I'll be really interested to see, how that plays out over the course of the series.
For myself, I need a level of, I think there's a thing I don't mind I need a level of resolution I will watch the second episode, but I'm not making a serious commitment after the absolute folderol that was Loki. So I need
oh my god,
I need a certain level of answers. A certain level of answers in the second episode. And if I don't get them, I'm not making that mistake. I'll just stick it in the corner like a paperweight.
Oh my god, Rob. This is hard to swallow.
I'm really looking forward to whatever comes next to this series. I'm really looking forward to whatever comes next to this series. I think the Marvel shows are always fun. There hasn't really been a bad one so far, Rob. I think there have been bad episodes within them, or episodes that haven't quite gelled. I mean, obviously Liz and I quite famously had disagreements over every other episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier. Liz is obviously still burned by the fact that I was completely right about the way those episodes were structured.
I'm only vindicated with my correctness.
Yeah. Okay. You can keep... hang on to that dizzy dream.
Hang on
that's
to that
what
dizzy dream. Yeah. My favorite episode was the one, I can't remember the show, where they're on this planet that's going to explode. They got drunk on a train, and then that was it, really. And at the end of it, they're on this planet that was going to explode. Absolutely nothing had gone forward in an hour. Might as well have waited on platform 6.
Much like my
wait very close to the edge.
Well, the light at the end of the tunnel of this is an oncoming train. So I think we're going to have to wrap it up, guys, because we've gone well over the usually allotted hour for this sort of stuff.
We did a double bill effectively.
We did do a double bill, and I really thank you guys.
Threw in an extra film review as well.
I really appreciate you guys sticking around and doing both.
Absolute joy, mate.
I don't know what the next thing is. I can't remember what the next one is of these. I'll be back for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny some point next week. Do flip over to our Indiana Jones series that Keith and I have done. We've looked at all 5 Indiana Jones movies. We're just about to release the Crystal Skull episode. In those shows, we pick out our favorite scene. We each have a favorite scene that we've picked out from each movie. Go and take a look at those. They're a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun doing them. We're up to Last Crusade right now. Crystal Skull is just about to drop, and then straight after that, Dial of Destiny. So do take a look at those. Liz, you can catch up with on Twitter at Liz C. Jordan. You can also check out the great videos she does for That's Entertainment on Facebook every week, bringing to your attention all the latest comic releases. They're usually out on a Wednesday afternoon here, Liz. They usually hit Wednesday about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and Wednesday morning if you're in the US.
So do take a look at that. And when in Massachusetts, do visit That's Entertainment. Rob's writing you can find on Irish Indian Times. There will be a link to all this stuff down in the not downstairs, down in the
on the cab,
in the gumps below. In the description.
And, do you want to tell them my Twitter handle for old time's sake?
Is it at ROBDEB?
Yes, it is.
I've heard that. Could you say that again, Rob?
Oh, sure. I'll tell you, Liz. Maybe Paul, just in case Paul. It's at RobDeb, ROBDEB, where I am burdened with a lack of
for the
point.
uninitiated. when we used to do the full gig, Rob used to spell out his name every week, and to such an extent that in my phone, Rob Deb is listed under ROBDEB, not just Rob Deb as you would normally. But all caps, Rob. All caps.
All caps.
That's how it's spelled.
So you can keep up with these guys. Do keep up with The Comic Crush at thecomiccrush.com. Follow us at The Comic Crush on Twitter and Instagram. Do check out the Patreon and the web store. All of that helps keep The Comic Crush going. Patreon is cheap as chips, less than the price of a cup of coffee a month. I need coffee. I can't even say that, you see. But thanks for listening. We'll be back with more very soon. Do keep an eye out.
How about Secret Invasion? Secret Invasion final episode? Are we going to...
Well, actually, Liz, I'll talk to you about that afterwards. I've got a slightly different idea now, and we'll catch up with that before next week's episode anyway. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for kind of sticking with this for so long. We've done nearly 90 minutes. I hope the audience has had the patience to listen to it all. 90 minutes of pure chaos. Right. Goodbye, guys.
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Bye.